Avi Loeb, professor from Harvard, one of the world's leading experts on the interstellar atlas, 3i atlas. Welcome to the RMN podcast. How are you, sir?
It's my great pleasure to join you.
And thank you so much for doing so. Not my normal guest, not my normal, but I've been so just blown away, mesmerized with all the talks I've seen you do. I had so many questions, and I thought, I really wish I could speak to this man to ask him the question. And here we are, we're sitting there. I was shouting at the TV when you were doing Joe Rogan, going, "Ask him this," and he didn't.
Go ahead, ask me the questions that he didn't ask.
So let's get into the just so everybody understands. I spoke to one individual today in particular who was an elderly gentleman, and he's a very famous gentleman in Scotland. He's going to turn 90 in November, and he said it's about time we had something come from somewhere else.
Well, that's exactly my sentiment. I feel reading the news every day that I'm attending a party where the attendees are misbehaving, and I really hope for a guest that will improve the situation.
And what I mean now that you study every day, I know it changes every day. And a couple of days ago there was 5 jets and so on and so forth. But if you could explain just the background, it doesn't have to be a long in-depth thing, but just a short. What has happened and why you're so excited and why the scientific community is so excited about this?
Well, we are discussing the third interstellar object, meaning an object that was spotted by telescope to move too fast to be bound by the sun and by gravity, and therefore it came from outside the solar system. And this one was discovered on July 1st this year, in 2025, and it was immediately clear that it has some unusual properties. First, its size, it's the size of a city. We don't know precisely the diameter of the object, but it's somewhere around 10 kilometers or so. It might be as low as 5 kilometers. It might be as high as 20 kilometers, but it's somewhere in that range. And that makes it a million times more massive than the first interstellar object that was discovered in 2017. So it's unusual in terms of its mass. And moreover, it moves along the plane of the planets around the sun. And it has some other unusual characteristics. For example, there was a so-called anti-tail, a glow extended from the object towards the sun. Usually you see it the other way around. These are cometary tails that are composed of dust and gas, and they're pushed behind the object away from the sun as a result of the radiation pressure from the sun as well as the solar wind. But in this case, it was an anti-tail, and that was observed in July and August, but even after it came closest to the sun on October 29th, it seems to have this anti-tail right now. And the question is why? And I can get into the possible explanations, but that's an anomaly. That's unusual. We don't see that very often. And then, in addition, it had nickel with very little iron shed from it, only 4% by mass, water in the cloud of gas surrounding it. And then, after it came closest to the sun, it appeared bluer than the sun. It brightened up by a factor of at least 5. And it exhibited non-gravitational acceleration. In other words, there was some additional force acting on it. And for a natural object, it might be just the evaporation of pockets of ice when they're exposed to sunlight as it came closest to the sun. And that gave it a recoil, just like a rocket. But it looks like from recent days that it has multiple jets, some of them in the direction of the sun, some away from the sun, and those extend out to 1 million kilometers or more. And it's just surprising because the solar winds should have swept them, at least those moving towards the sun. And it implies that there might be a very high mass loss rate from the object, which by itself requires that the object will have a large surface area to absorb enough sunlight in order for, if this is a natural comet, in order for that energy absorbed from the sun to sublimate the ice. And I calculated that that requires somewhere between 20 and 50 kilometers diameter object at the very least, which is untenable. It's much more than we thought the object is based on the Hubble Space Telescope image that was obtained back in July. So one possibility is that the object broke into fragments. However, the latest image shows that it's still a single body, but it's possible that some of those fragments flew away, sort of like fireworks in an explosion, and those are the trails of those fragments are the jets that we think are emitted from the object itself, but in fact maybe they are the trails from the fragments that flew apart. So we don't know, but at any event, it's very anomalous. And there are two possible interpretations. Either it's a natural comet, or maybe these anomalies, in particular, the large size and the being in the plane of the planets, is a technological, these are technological signatures that the object was targeting the inner solar system. And of course, that would have very dramatic consequences. Because we would realize that there might be a more accomplished sibling in the Milky Way galaxy for our family of intelligent civilizations. We are not alone. And of course, we can only launch a rocket roughly the size of Starship at the moment. That's the biggest. And it's less than the size of a football field, less than 100 meters, whereas this object is the size of a city. So we cannot imagine technologies that would enable us technologically to produce such a spacecraft. So there will be a lot to learn if it's technological, but even if it's just a rock, an icy rock, it has properties that make it unique. And one way or another, we will definitely learn something new. And in the coming weeks, it should be very exciting because on December 19th, it comes closest to the Earth. That will be at a distance of about 250 million kilometers. And that would allow hundreds of telescopes on Earth to monitor it and give us data. And I'm really looking forward to the flood of data. There are two types of people that are excited by the possibility that it might be technological. Some are believers and some are genuine scientists. And the way to tell the difference between them is to ask who will be thrilled at the flood of data. Obviously, a genuine scientist will be delighted, even if it contradicts what we thought originally, just because it's a learning experience. Whereas someone who has convictions will have a hard time accepting data that goes against those convictions.
I was going to ask you, I mean, what is the biggest thing that would change in the scientific community if it were to be? And I mean, the first
Yeah.
fundamental thing on the onlook to basically, the whole universe, what would be the biggest change?
Yeah, so as of now, you can think of the experts, comet experts, as AI systems, because in the context of AI systems, what they're saying depends on the training data set. So just think of comet experts as AI systems that were trained only on data about icy rocks. And that's all they know about. So any object in the sky is interpreted as an icy rock. Now, even if it's, for example, the Tesla Roadster car, that was definitely a technological object launched to space in 2018 by SpaceX. And then on January 2nd this year, those comet experts, the Minor Planet Center, cataloged the Tesla Roadster car as a near-Earth asteroid by mistake. Then they realized, in fact, it is a car, not a rock. So if you are training your judgment on just rocks, icy rocks, then obviously you would interpret even technological gadgets as those, and you would classify a spacecraft as a dark comet. That's exactly this the label that was assigned to the first interstellar object, Oumuamua, which exhibited some non-gravitational acceleration, but had no gas or dust detected around it. So the experts called it a dark comet, meaning it's a comet that for which you can't really find the signatures of a comet. So it's an oxymoron, but that's that's the way their mind is set. And what I'm suggesting to them is to expand their training data set by all the objects that we launched to space, because we know that it's not just rocks out there. We have 5 probes making their way out of the solar system right now. So
Yeah.
they're refusing to do that, and that shows the unfortunate nature of academia, where whoever declare themselves as experts refuse to accept new knowledge and resist it because it threatens their expertise in some sense to admit that it might be something different. So it's obviously a learning experience, but what we need is undisputable evidence that there is some signature of this object that cannot be mimicked by a natural comet, and it definitely implies that it is a spacecraft. And it's in principle, it's straightforward to tell the difference between a technological object and a rock. For example, if it maneuvers in ways that you cannot explain, or you see some artificial lights, or you see some heat associated with an engine, or you have a close-up photograph that shows that it's not a rock. It actually has
Yeah.
screws and bolts and some buttons on it. So that's what we need. We need some undisputable piece of evidence so that, and I'm willing to bet that when we have it, at that point, those experts would say, well, we thought it all along as a possibility. In fact, there were other people mentioning, decades ago that this could happen. And there is nothing really unexpected about it. So the way that a good idea is eventually accepted is by the experts admitting that they thought about it first.
What is your hunch, shall we say? I mean, you're doing all the research, you're an expert, you've written all these books, you're at Harvard. I mean, what is your hunch? Now, I know you've got the
Yeah,
scoring chart of and you were
right.
sitting on enough. I understand that. But, you know, when you go to bed at night, you close your eyes, you get a little glint, a little something, something, little piece of
Yeah.
magic. What's your piece of mind? What are you thinking? Are you I mean, take science out of it if you can for a second. Just
Yeah.
what's your feeling?
Yeah, so the reason I stuck with the narrative that we must entertain a black swan event where this object is technological, and even if we assign a small probability, it could have a huge impact on society, and therefore we must take it seriously. The reason I stuck with that narrative is because the trajectory, is very unusual. It spends a lot of time in the vicinity of planets, and also this object is so big that just the mass budget of rocky material would not allow the delivery of such a package over a decade. You would expect it once per 10,000 years. So, I cannot forget about these two facts. You cannot avoid them. And all these people who say it's a comet and behaves like a comet and so forth, they are not explaining these two facts. So, okay, if it's a random rock, why is it aligned with the planet to that level? You expect 1 in 500 chance of that. Why is it so massive? You expect at least 1 in 1,000 chance of it being so massive relative to previous objects. So these are very small probabilities. And for
Yeah,
me, the hunch, if you ask me, the gut feeling is, there is something we don't understand about it. And you have to keep in mind also the story about the Trojan horse, where the city of Troy thought it's just, nothing, and ended up being quite significant for their future. And therefore, I strongly believe that we should consider each and every interstellar object seriously as a potential threat, and of course get as much data as possible. Now, if this object were to break apart, and we would see the core of its body, like being dispersed as a result of the illumination by sunlight. And we infer that it's definitely not natural in that case. So be it. And I'll immediately bring down my rank from right now it's 4 on the Loeb scale, where 0 is natural and 10 is technological. I'll bring it all the way down to 0, because at that point it would be clear that there is nothing inside. But for the moment, just today I wrote an essay about another anomaly that the object exhibits, and the fact that we see jets coming out of it right now, this week. And these jets appear to be quite collimated, focused. But the object itself was inferred to be spinning over a period of 16 hours. That was back in August already. July and August, it was rotating based on data that was obtained back then. So if it's spinning, and there are these jets, which are the result of pockets of ice that get sublimated when they're illuminated by sunlight, why aren't they smeared? As the object is spinning, you would get the jet to spin with it. Of course, you might say, oh, well, maybe only when the pocket of ice is pointed towards the sun, it gets evaporated. And as soon as it gets shadowed by the landscape surrounding it, you won't get a jet coming out of it. So every 16 hours, it will provide a puff and then these puffs add together like peas on a pod. But the problem with that is that we see jets also pointed away from the sun, where they're completely in the shadow of the object itself. So then this is not a good explanation. And I find that anomalous, because, I mean, it may well be that it's technological and you have thrusters and they're used for navigation or some balance, and then they would always point in a fixed direction, because that's the way you want to navigate this object. You wouldn't let it drift in orientation. So it's still a mystery. This is the latest one as to what the origin of these jets is. Is it really pockets of ice, or is it thrusters? And I'm just waiting for the upcoming weeks to supply us with the data needed to infer their nature.
Can you bring me along?